Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to another episode of Feed the Beast Revelation, and we're over here in front of the building facades we did last time, as we experimented with different build styles and tried to figure out what we were really doing with our base area, and I'm really glad we did that, because even if we don't end up using any of these styles directly, or even if we don't use any aspect of them, I still got a lot of inspiration and a lot of ideas for what I want our base area to be like by doing these. So that is awesome. Of course, you guys also gave me a ton of inspiration, a lot of ideas of how we could merge different styles together or other details we could try and do. So thank you all for that. That is immensely helpful when I'm working on projects like this one, so keep that up. And obviously I would like to continue this process. I would like to get to the point where we know our exact build style. However, we're going to start running into a bit of a roadblock. So at the end of last episode, I mentioned that there was another build style I wanted to try out, one that kind of came to mind as I was working on all four of these, and I think it has a lot of potential. But I don't have access to at least one of the resources that it's going to need, and that's kind of a problem. Like, I could get it, but it would be a massive chore. And that's something that's going to be kind of a recurring problem with the stage of the game that we're at. Because realistically, we're still at a very early game stage of modded Minecraft. We're still doing things completely manually, we're doing very little with automation, we're not really doing things the most efficient way. We're not taking advantage of all of the mods, and we really need to start doing that so that we can make this entire process easier. And I think that for the next episode or two, that's what I want to focus on. I want to focus on making the processes easier, getting our hands on things that will make getting resources easier, and all of that good stuff. It's going to make the building process and pretty much everything that we do that much quicker and that much more efficient. So, the main things I want to work on today, and hopefully we can get through a few, aren't really going to seem immediately connected to that, but they're more so connected to making our lives easier. They're going to be just making things more efficient for us. And the first one, and arguably the most major one, is to improve our storage situation. So, we've had the same storage setup since episode number 1. A bunch of storage crates and a few basic drawers. That is it. And that's honestly just not cutting it. And to be honest, it's not been cutting it for quite a while now. So, like, for example, our ore chest, completely full of random stuff. I had to make a second one and put it on top to hold the processed stuff because it just wouldn't fit anymore. And honestly, that's the case for all of these. Our natural plants and whatnot, that's completely full. This one is just a catastrophe of different blocks. We really need to fix this because it's hard to find things. It's hard to find space to put things. I haven't been mining recently almost entirely because I just don't have space for it. And more importantly, as we start automating stuff, we're going to start generating blocks automatically, and we need a storage system that can actually handle that. So obviously there's a lot of different storage systems we could use. In this particular pack, Applied Energistics is kind of the king of the hill. That's the one you aim to get. And realistically, I could get there today if I wanted to, and that would be the best way to go, undeniably. But because this series is all about trying out different mods, and I want to make sure I try out everything possible, I don't want to skip straight to that one quite yet. I'm sure once we have our base going and I work on a full-end, kind of end-game storage system that we're going to keep, that will probably be Applied Energistics. But for right now, for the sake of trying out other mods, I'm going to go ahead and make my own with a mishmash of a couple different mods. And I think it should turn out pretty good for how cheap and easy it is. So, this is going to require a little bit of prep work. I want to expand this room a bit because it's feeling a little claustrophobic and kind of, I don't like this pillar here. So I'm going to try and take care of that and gather some resources together. And then we're going to go ahead and make our brand new storage system. So here is our new storage system, looking pretty fancy, and it is a huge upgrade over the way we were doing things before, so that's pretty cool. Now, it's not quite done just yet. I do still need to move all of the items over into it. They're still sitting here in our storage crates, But I figured before I go through that entire process, I would take the opportunity to show you guys the system and explain how it all works so you're familiar with it. Because honestly, this is a really good way of handling early game storage. It's relatively cheap. The only expensive materials is it takes a little bit of quartz, and I think it takes a single emerald to pull off all of the stuff that I did here. So really not a big deal. You just need to get to the nether is basically the biggest challenge. And up until you get to the point of making an applied energistics or refined storage system, I think that this one is going to be pretty dang good. So the basic idea with this storage system is that it's split into two halves. We've got our bulk storage via basic drawers, and we've got the rest of our storage via modular storage units. There's a few other little things going on that give us different features and whatnot, and we'll take a look at those as we go, but as far as the actual item storage itself goes, it's really just those two sections. Now, if you're not familiar with the storage drawers mod, the idea behind it is essentially it gives you a really cheap and easy way of storing a large amount of a few types of blocks. So basically, each individual drawer, so you can see these bottom blocks have a single drawer each, the ones up here have 2 drawers each, and these have 4. Each individual drawer can hold a single item, and nothing else can go into it. So this one here that we have stone in, no other block can go in here except for stone. But it can hold quite a lot of stone. By default, each one of these blocks, like the full block encompassing all of the drawers, holds 32 stacks of items. So we could put 32 stacks of stone in here before it couldn't hold any more. And we can also upgrade that. So there's 7 upgrade slots, and there's different kinds of upgrades. There's some that output redstone signals, or give you little fill meters, or void excess blocks. But the important ones are the ones that increase the amount of storage space you have. So these are honestly relatively cheap. They just take 2 of the material type that they represent, so like 2 diamonds, for example, and the rest of it's completely nonsense. It's just super cheap. So they're relatively easy to get, and they give you huge increases in your storage. So even just the obsidian tier increases your storage by 2 times the base value. So that's not just doubling it, that's giving you an additional twice as much as the base. So that's an additional 64 stacks from this upgrade, I think. The iron one gives you 4 times, the gold gives 8, the diamond is 16, the emerald is 32, and they're not exclusive either. So we could drag 7 of the emerald upgrades in here, and I believe if we did that on one of these drawers that has just a single drawer on it, I believe it would be able to store 1.6 some million items, which is absolutely bonkers. Obviously that number gets split when you add more drawers to it, so this one would store half of that for 2 different types of items, and this one would store a quarter of that for 4 different items, but you get the idea. So that's how storage drawers work. Very cool mod and very handy, but it actually gets a bit better because you can also automate them, and you do that using the drawer controller. So the way that the drawer controller works is essentially it's a little block that you place next to some of your basic drawers, and as long as it's touching one, it will then go through and find all of the other storage drawers that are connected, like connected via the sides, and any storage drawers it sees within a 12-block radius around it is all part of a single system. And essentially what you can do then is pop items in via a pipe. We're using these impulse item ducts, so stuff goes relatively quickly. But any item that tries to go into the drawer controller, if it can find a spot up here in our drawer system, it will automatically go to it. Even if it's way up here, if it's way down here, anywhere. It's all just one big storage unit as far as the mod itself is concerned. So for bulk storage purposes, even for automation, this is a really good mod. Now for everything else, because obviously we don't want to set up an individual drawer for every single item in the game, we're going to send that over to modular storage units. Now these are little machine blocks from RF Tools, and honestly they're pretty cool. So with these, rather than storing items physically, rather than having like a big old chest full of blocks, you can just put them onto a little module. So this tier 2 storage module that I have in here is technically what's holding all of our items. So like all the stuff just disappeared, that's because I took this out. I could go pop this into another module or whatever. This is essentially a hard drive holding all of our information. So this one, the tier 2 storage module, can hold 200 different stacks of items, which is quite a lot. Keep in mind, spooky noise. Keep in mind that the storage crates over here hold like 120 or 130 stacks, something along those lines. So each one of these is a little bit bigger than those, and I can technically upgrade these to tier 3, which would give us up to 300 stacks of storage. So already that's pretty cool. They also have additional features like we can search, which is very, very useful when you're searching for different things. I suppose that was kind of a redundant way to say that, but you get what I mean. We can reorder them based on count or name. You can change how they're displayed rather. The coolest feature though is this little crafting grid down here. Basically, you can craft stuff straight from your storage inventories without having to take things out, go to a crafting grid, all of that nonsense. So for example, let's say we wanted to craft a button, which I've already done a couple times just to make sure it worked, but you can pop one of your stone in here, and essentially, this allows you to just automatically use the stone from the inventory to create a button. Now, obviously, that's not super useful in this particular case, but if you wanted to make something more complicated, that's a huge time saver, especially because you can actually store the recipe. Like up here, we've stored that button recipe, so we could just double click this anytime and we'd immediately have the button recipe in here. We could just click one and there's our new button. And of course, we can stick that back in there. So that is already really cool. It also gets a little bit better in that it works with JEI. So let's say we were going to make a Signalum servo. If we had a particular storage module that had all of this stuff necessary for the servo in it, all we would have to do is open up this recipe in JEI, click Move Items, and they're automatically placed in there. So we could automatically craft the servo without having to manually find all of the stuff, pull it out, craft it, put the stuff back, all of that. So that is super duper useful, really, really cool stuff. And the way that this is going to work in our storage system is basically we're going to pipe the items past our drawer controller. So anything that goes into bulk storage will get caught there, and then anything else will come over to our modular storage, and it will try to go in the first one. And if it can't, because we can filter these, we can make it so that only stuff that's already in the modular storage can get put into it, or we could also add a thermal expansion filter to make it so only certain mod items go into certain storage units. That's another way we could handle it. But if it can't get into the first one, it'll go to the second, the third, the fourth, all the way down until we eventually have a miscellaneous modular storage. And for this one, I did upgrade to a tier 3 because this one's probably going to have quite a lot in it. So that's the general idea for our modular storage units and our general kind of storage and how it's all going to work. It does have one other aspect to it as far as this basic kind of setup that I've shown so far, and that's the input. Obviously, we have those item pipes going around. We need a way to put items into them, and that's what these two little things here are for. So the first way that we have to input our items is an ender chest. And obviously this is not a normal vanilla one. There's two special traits to it. One, it's got a double chest sized inventory, so we can shift click in all kinds of good stuff. And two, it's got these three little white lines on it. And these are essentially an identifier for this end chest. So basically right now we're set to the white end chest. And anything we put in here will show up in any other white end chest. Well, sort of. Currently they'd automatically get put out and pulled out and put into our storage system, but you get the idea. If we were to dye one of this things like blue, for example, like this last one, that would be a different end chest, technically. So if we had stuff in the white inventory from a different ender chest, it would sit in there and it wouldn't show up in this one because we had that dyed blue, for example. So that's how that works. The main reason I use this instead of any other random inventory is because this will allow us to automatically send items into our storage system from pretty much anywhere. So if we create a system to automatically create stone for us, we can just send those items into an end chest with the same combination, and it'll automatically port into our system. So that's really, really cool. This other little thing next to it that looks like the top of an enchanting table, just with emeralds instead, is a docking station for our dank null. So the dank null, as you may recall, is a really cool way of storing a ton of items. And let's say we come back from a mining trip and we have all kinds of stuff going on in here. All we have to do is right click on this and it'll pop it down. And then anything that's in here that's set to extract properly will just get pulled out automatically and sorted wherever it needs to go. And it's also very, very quick because we have the impulse item ducts and the signalum servo on it. So it'll literally only take a minute to extract hundreds and hundreds of items from this. So at this point, we already have a really, really cool storage system. We could just put stuff into these two blocks here. It'll automatically get set to the basic drawers or over to modular storage, wherever it needs to go. But we actually could go a couple steps further than that, and it was really, really easy to do it, in fact. And I highly recommend you do this with your own systems when it's like early game storage, because this is amazing. So down here, I have this little storage scanner block. Now, this does take power. I do need to run an actual power line to it. But basically, what this does is it allows you to scan nearby inventories, and it recognizes all of them and gives you access to all of them. So here's our drawer controller for our kind of storage drawer system. This one entry keeps track of all of the storage drawer stuff. So all of that cragstone, all of that red rock, all of the terracotta, that is all available to us through this one interface. And of course we can take stuff out, we can put it back in. We can also use the crafting system, because this is another like RF tools block. So it's similar, slurring my words now, but it's similar to the modular storage. It's got the same little crafting setup on the side. So that means that we can access any of our random modular storage blocks and get the items from it and use them in crafting from this one UI. In fact, it's actually better than that, because there's also this all routable tab. This is every single inventory that we have up above, because they all have the stars selected. So if I wanted to make, say, that Signalum servo from earlier, I wouldn't even need all of this stuff in the same inventory, because this one UI can keep track of all of our inventories, so we could craft stuff no matter where the items are. We could have the glass in one chest, the iron in another, the Signalum in another, the redstone in another, and we'd still only need to click a couple of times to make all of it, rather than searching for it. Why is my volume so loud? Is that seriously... Hold on. Sorry, that rain sound is just crazy. Oh, my weather volume was back up. Okay. That explains some of it. Anyway, that is the storage scanner, which is amazing. Like I said, really cool stuff. But obviously it's not very much use to us down here. I could have just put it upstairs, obviously, but I wanted to be a little bit fancier, so I've gone ahead and set up a storage terminal. And essentially all this does is it links us to that little block down below and gives us the same UI. The only thing we can't do from this UI that we can do with the one down below is rescan our inventories, which we only need to do if we add more to our system. So, honestly, this should be fine for just general day-to-day use stuff. And like I said, same situation applies. We can craft from all of our inventories at one time. We have access to all of our different blocks at one time. We have our search, so we can narrow down what we need. All of that good stuff. So that already is a monumental improvement over the manual way we were doing things before. But there's one other thing that I found out we could do, and it is really going to be a game changer. And that is this little storage tablet. Now, this was the most expensive part of this entire setup. The tablet itself did take 3 blocks of redstone, a block of quartz, and a single emerald. But honestly, that stuff is not that hard to get. It's just a teeny tiny bit of effort. And what this allows us to do is completely wirelessly access our inventory. Our entire storage system is at our disposal so long as this area is chunk loaded, which of course we can do automatically via the Feed the Beast utilities stuff. So essentially what this means is that no matter where I am in the world, if I need building blocks, I can just open my UI and get them. If I need, say, I'm working on a new build and I need Ipe wood stairs, all I need to do is open this up, find the Ipe wood. If I need to craft it into stairs, I can do that right in this inventory and craft however many I need, and then I'm good to go. I never need to come back to my base for this. The only reason I would need to come back to my base for something is if I needed to, pardon me, is if I needed to utilize one of these machines. So that is pretty amazing. That is a massive, massive game changer. And for something that I could realistically have gotten in a single day of playing, like pretty easily, I'm really impressed with how useful this actually is. So that is our storage system. As I said earlier, if I skip through things a little bit or you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I think that's going to be pretty fantastic. And I realize I've been rambling for about 14 minutes again, somehow, even though all of this stuff was already set up. So I think that's going to do it for our storage system. Now we need to move on and try and take care of something else after I deal with all of this sorting out. Ugh. I do not look forward to doing that, but it should be fine. So I'm going to go take care of all of this, but once that's taken care of, I'm also going to have to try and expand out our base area here a little bit, because I need a new area to put another contraption that's going to help kind of make the future processes of building a little bit easier. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get to any of the bigger stuff I want to do, but at least one more little thing today should be helpful. So I'm going to go and get to sorting all of this out. Oh, joy. And then I'm going to expand our base a little bit, and we'll go from there. So our storage system is all up and running. We've got all of our stuff in it, and it has been super duper useful as I've worked on preparing stuff for our next build area. I have noticed a couple weird quirks with it. Like, for example, sometimes when you put stuff into the ender chest to sort out, it will occasionally skip where it's going to and end up in the miscellaneous one. And I believe what's happening with that is that the storage drawer system, for example, gets overwhelmed and it can't quite keep up, and then the items end up passing by and they end up naturally going into the miscellaneous one. The only other issue I've saw is that sometimes there's certain blocks that just do not get filtered properly, like glass, for example. For some strange reason, the filter in the modular storage unit does not recognize glass. Like, even though the filter is configured properly, it will not allow the glass back in. And the only way to fix that is to take the filter out, put the glass in, and then put the filter back in, which is a huge problem because that means our auto sorting and everything isn't going to work. So I'm going to have to look into that. We may need to switch over to a different form of sorting if I can't figure that out. But other than that, the few objects that causes problems with, this has been a really, really good thing. And in fact, it's actually been super useful with the auto crafting and all of that. Really, really glad that we set this up the way we did, even if it is a little bit glitchy. Anyway, that is our storage system, and now let's move on to the other build. So I built this little room down here, which I kind of wish I didn't have to do. I really didn't want to have to extend our temporary base area anymore because I wanted to be moved out by now, but I guess we can always make use of this area later on for something cool, so it's not the end of the world. Now then, the reason I built it all the way down here, and the reason I added this extra room for it, is because I wanted it to be far away from our storage system, because it is going to make a little bit of noise. And what we're actually going to be doing is leveling up our Tinker's Construct tools. Now, I brought this idea up last episode, I think. It may have been the episode before that. I lose track of things. But essentially, I'm going to be making a system where we can automatically level up our Tinker's tools without having to do all of the mining and all of the digging ourselves. And I asked you guys how you felt about that. Most of you said you were on board with it, at least those of you who commented on it. So I think we're going to go ahead and do it. Now, the basic idea of how this is going to work is we're going to automatically place down blocks, we're going to break them with our tools, and then we're going to automatically pick them up and place them again. And we're going to form this kind of endless loop of breaking the same blocks over and over and over again. And essentially what that's going to do is give us a kind of free leveling experience when it comes to things like shovels and pickaxes and hammers. And even lumber axes could work with this. So that should be pretty cool, and it's also going to serve a really useful purpose even after our tools are leveled up. I'll talk to you guys about that momentarily, but let's go ahead and build the system quick. It is fairly simple, though it does take a few mods that we haven't actually gotten into properly yet. The first one being actually additions with the auto placer. Oops. So the auto placer is what we're going to use to place down the blocks automatically, obviously. And making this is relatively simple. We did need to create an atomic reconstructor block, which is basically something from Actually Additions that shoots a little laser beam out and allows you to convert basic objects into special ones that you use for crafting in Actually Additions. Relatively straightforward and pretty simple to get into. I'll go into that in more depth when we actually get to Actually Additions in the near future. So now that we have our auto placer wall in place, we're going to go ahead and place down the thing that's going to actually break the blocks once they're placed down. And that is a mechanical user from Extra Utilities 2. This block essentially allows us to fake a player. It allows us to either left click or right click with different objects and do all kinds of cool stuff like that, and make it pretend that a player is actually doing those actions, which is why our tools can be leveled up this way. So the mechanical user is really, really useful, but it does have a requirement that we don't quite meet yet, and that is a power requirement. So unlike other blocks that we've used so far, unlike other machines, this one doesn't take RF or EU or CF or any of the normal power sources. This one takes a specific power source from Extra Utilities called grid power. Now, grid power is kind of an interesting one. I'll explain it more momentarily. But basically, in order to generate this, we're going to need to create some specific blocks. And this is kind of a multi-step process due to the fact that we've never done it before. So the first step in this process is to create a resonator. So the resonator is basically a block that allows us to create other blocks that are useful for Extra Utilities. Sort of like the atomic reconstructor was for Actually Additions. The issue here is that the resonator also needs power. It's a situation in which you need power in order to create power. Thankfully, there is also a block called a manual mill, and essentially this allows us to convert physical energy into grid power. Basically, we can stand here, right-click on this thing, and it'll spin up and give us enough grid power to make our resonator work. Once that's done its thing, we can go ahead and take the blocks from the resonator, and that's what we need to make the water mill. So the water mill is what we're actually going to be using to power our mechanical user. So essentially the way the water mill works is that it checks each side of the block, and it looks for flowing water. If there's flowing water next to the block, it will generate a proportionate amount of GP. And it does that based on how strong the flow of the water is, based on how close it is to the source block. So obviously there is an ideal way to set this up, and if you do so, it will give you 4 GP per side for a grand total of 16 from a single water mill. So now that we have our water mill in place, even if it is kind of a terrible temporary place, this is generating all the power we need for our mechanical user, and technically it's already hooked up. The way that grid power works is a little different from other power sources in that it's not a power source that generates and then you can store it or move it around. It's just a constant stream of power that you can wirelessly tap into. So as long as this area is loaded, anywhere in our world that we need grid power, it will automatically tap into the 16 provided by this water mill and try and use it. So the mechanical user down below is going to use about 4.5 of that. It will automatically pull it from up here, even though they're not physically connected. So that is very, very cool. Let's head back down there and finish up this build quick. And the next part of this process is going to be to automatically pick up the blocks that we break using our mechanical user and put them back into our auto placers so we can create kind of an infinite loop. So in order to do that, we're going to use something called an absorption hopper, which is kind of like the vacuum hopper from Ender.io, if you're more familiar with that. Essentially, this will pick up items within a 7x7x7 radius around it, or diameter, I think, is actually the true way that this is done. But anyway, it's going to pick up all of the blocks that are automatically broken off, and we're going to send that back into the placer using impulse item ducts. So we're going to set up a grid of those back here, and then connect down like so, and over. We're going to want to disconnect this so it kind of distributes properly. And then we're going to want to pop a Signalum servo on here. It could probably be a lower tier one, but I think this will do. Set that to round robin, which will set the items to kind of evenly distribute, or mostly evenly distribute amongst our auto placers. And with that, I think we're actually pretty much done. So let's go ahead and enable our servo. And very carefully place the blocks in. We don't want to break anything right now or automatically get pulled in here and then placed out, and we'll have this big old mess to deal with. So let's go ahead and put in some glass. This is to keep the items from flying out where they can't get picked up by the hopper, which can happen. I don't want that there. Okay, and now we need to put a lever down because I want this to be enable or disableable. And we also want to pop in a few of these upgrades, these speed upgrades. I don't know how much that helps in this particular case, but I assume it does. We're going to go ahead and set this to a left click, and we can go ahead and put in our hammer. And I forgot to leave a spot to enable us to put in the items. Oh, joy. Okay, that'll do. And I figured that was happening. It was putting in some of the shards. I'm going to assume those are the only ones that got through. Nope, of course not. I should probably double check. Can I zoop in there with my teleport wand? Thank you. Okay, we're good to go. So now, if we place some cobblestone in here, you can see it's already doing its thing. Let's go ahead and throw some in some of these other ones just to get it kind of started. And it should automatically distribute it over time. Let's seal this off. And as you can see, that's going to town. It's making horrible, horrible noises. I really need to re-quiet down those shocking noises. Unfortunately, when the Twitch launcher decided to destroy my entire Revelation folder, it replaced the sounds I fixed. So I'm going to have to fix that, especially if I'm going to be using this thing. But as you can see, the XP on our hammer is going up. We could replace this with dirt to level up a shovel. We could just put our pick in there and it would work on the one block that this would be breaking. In general, this is just going to work really well for this. It's also, it's just so annoying. It's also going to be useful even after our tools are fully leveled, though. Because if we were to put a hammer in there that had a copper piece on it, that would have the well-established trait. And what that would allow it to do is actually start getting XP off of the blocks that it drops. And that little absorption hopper we put down also automatically picks up XP. So once all of our tools are leveled up and we don't need to use this for that anymore, if we were to throw in a copper tool and just let it be, we would get free XP for it, just for keeping like a watermill around or keeping a little bit of GP going. So that is pretty fantastic. I think this is going to serve us quite well, and our hammer is already getting quite a lot of experience. Obviously, I am going to have to pull these out manually and repair them fairly frequently, but I think that's pretty good. So, there is our tool leveling system, and I'm going to let that go for a little while. Of course, we also got our storage system done today, and there were a few other things I wanted to get done, but unfortunately, the episode's already getting quite long. I've rambled my way through quite a lot of stuff today, and, well, I think we're going to have to call it here. Next episode, I think we're going to continue this process of preparing and kind of advancing ourselves a bit, and I think we're going to start working on getting certain materials automatically. We're going to work on getting probably some ores without having to go and dig manually, and we're also going to try and get our hands on certain items and certain blocks that we don't have access to currently in kind of an automated way. And that's going to help a lot when we go back to our building process, which hopefully we'll get to in the episode after that. So, for today, I'm going to call it here. Thank you guys for watching, and, well, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.